Hi, I'm Sam Fessich from the EduMagic Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. I got a little different show for you today. Today I'm being interviewed by my friend, Beth Splain. You know her. She's a professional opera singer and the author of several novels, two of which, Swan Song and Steel Butterflies, I've talked to her about on this show. Well, today she is asking the questions of me. We're focused on my surgery to remove a tumor from my brain that happened February 1st, 2022. She asked me questions about the symptoms, the diagnosis, the surgery, and the recovery process. There's so much to share. I can't thank her enough for asking the questions and being interested. Thanks for listening. Wishing you the best. Take care. Enjoy the show. Basically what they said is that you've got about probably 2 years. And if we wait that long, that tumor is going to be much, much bigger. And it has, not only is it going to destroy the nerve for the hearing on the right side, but it's also going to, right behind that nerve is this facial nerve that controls the right side of your face. And they said if it destroys that, then it's going to be like a stroke on your side of your face. You'll lose all control of the right side of your face.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here. And I got a little different episode for you today. Today, I'm going to be interviewed. That's right. I've got my friend Beth Splain. You remember her. She's the author of Steel Butterflies and Swan Song, as well as a professional opera singer, and does all kinds of cool things. And so today she's going to be talking to me about something you've heard me mention before, which is back in February of 2022, matter of fact, on February 1st, never forget that day, I had a tumor removed from my brain. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So she's going to talk about, ask me questions, and I'm going to share some of what happened, how that came about, and what's going on now. So, Beth, glad to have you on the show. Thanks so much for talking with me, and thanks for being here.
Well, thank you, Steve, for having me. And I just want to say I appreciate that you said my friend Beth Splain, because when I was preparing for this chat today, I was thinking that there are some people that you meet, especially online. In person, you can get that feel, but online, when you connect with someone, I feel like it's very special. So I was thinking, it's funny you said that, because in the shower, I was thinking, I would call him a friend, and you just said that. So I really appreciate that.
Well,
my name is Beth Splain, and I'm very proud to be here with Steve Miletto, who is an amazing man for many, many reasons, but not the least of which he and his family and his friends went through something recently that obviously will change his life forever. But how this came about is that Steve and I, for my first book, were supposed to be on, I think, for 40 minutes or 45 minutes. And an hour and a half later, after chatting, we were like, we got to go. And then I wrote another book, and we chatted again, and we chatted again. And it just became clear as I'm listening to his story. He told me the story about his treatment, and I asked him if he had ever podcasted about this. And I feel like this is something that, one, a lot of people don't know, or if you've mentioned it, they want to know more. So it is certainly a position of vulnerability to put yourself in the hot seat, being the interviewee instead of the interviewer. So I give you props for that.
Thanks.
But this is a conversation between us that we happen to share with your billions of followers. So first I want to start with, can you talk about, without getting into too much detail, what you had, what it's called medically, and then I want to back up into symptoms. Okay, so can you just talk a little bit about what it's called?
Sure. In the beginning, when they first were figuring things out, the the doctors were primarily surgeons, were talking about it, calling it an acoustic neuroma. And in the later, they started referring to it more as a vestibular schwannoma. And so these are the two very scientific words, and basically it's a tumor that grows inside, against in and around the brain, and in this case, it was in the ear canal, and it develops around the nerve that feeds the balance and the hearing. It controls all that for in this case my right ear.
So in my reading that I did for this, so I think it's the vestibular nerve, right, that connects
Yes.
the ear to the brain. And the cells that surround that are called Schwann cells, which is where they get the vestibular schwannoma. And from what I read, not being a researcher myself, caveat, my understanding is that there's a gene on chromosome 22 that is supposed to create proteins that make sure that the Schwann cells do not reproduce too quickly, because if they do, it can cause this. So it's hard to know, whether this was handed down, and I know it probably doesn't even matter to you, but it could matter to your kids, of course. So that's one. And then the acoustic neuroma, neuro being brain and acoustic meaning ear. So you had something inside your ear canal that was growing and pressing on the nerve, or potentially pressing on the nerve, right? And my understanding is this is non-cancerous. Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, it's not
Okay.
not cancer.
And so first, let me say this. And then we're going to back up to symptoms. When you first heard this diagnosis, was your immediate thought cancer?
Oh yeah, there's
That would be
nothing.
mine.
Yeah, there's nothing. I when first of all, it's not like with something else, like you get a burn or you break something or something like that. They're messing around. They're talking about messing around inside your head, and it's
Yeah.
like that's an interesting thought. So yes, yeah, that's the first thing I thought. And the doctors were quick to say it's not cancerous.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's back up. So you were diagnosed on February 1st, 2022, or was that your surgery?
That was my surgery.
Okay.
I was diagnosed sometime, actually about May of 2021.
Okay.
And
right.
it starts the whole series of things in action.
Okay. So what were the symptoms that you were experiencing?
So I don't see doctors a lot, and or at least before all this.
Well, that's shocking. I'm shocked.
Yes, and and so at a time I was in the Army, and in the Army that's probably when I saw the most doctors, because they make you see them, and you have all physicals and all kinds of things, and and you pretty much equate doctors with shots and things like that, and but so for the most part I don't really see doctors, and I think I come from a family that did the same thing, and so when I'm not feeling well and stuff like this, and unless I'm really feeling bad, I'm just going to take care of it myself, and well, so I say that because I wasn't really paying attention to something that I was dealing with. Basically, what was happening was I started getting these funny feelings of I'm pretty adventurous. I mean, if we go someplace walking or something like this, or we're in these, I like finding ruins and things that used to just have cool history to them and stuff like this, and I go walking around and you find these walls to walk on, and there's a little bit of mountain goat in me, and it's not it's not that I'm not climbing any giant rock walls or anything like this, but at the same time, I'm not really thinking too much. I'm gonna, hop, skip, and a jump, or walk across this narrow path or something like that. And I'd been doing it a lot when we walk on stuff, and then a couple of times, and I didn't tell my wife. I was like, I had these funny feelings of, almost like a dizziness as I started to walk on something. I'd not felt that before, and I just kind of pushed through it. And but this one time we were at this park, and it's what made me tell my wife that I'm having these problems. All right, because I started to walk across this little area that went across. It connected you to another piece of what used to be a big manufacturer where they made rope a long time ago, and they funneled the water from this river into this what was a plant. None of that exists anymore except the parts where they would funnel the water. So I'm crossing this little rock wall across onto this other rock wall that's across water, so that you're walking across water. And I started to walk across that, and all of a sudden I was like, I'm not thinking I'm going to walk across this, because I felt like I'm going to fall. Almost like I was thinking like it's some sort of vertigo or something like this, that I'm getting dizzy. So I backed up, and I was like, I don't think I can do this. 'Cause as soon as I got out in the middle, it's like, whoa. And that kind of bothered me a little bit, and I just kind of put up with it. I just thought this was starting to get a little more common. All right. What
did your wife say about that when you told her?
Well, she was happy I told her, because I hadn't, but I said, I don't know how to say this, but it's just kind of like, I can't do this right now. This is like, I feel, and I said, I've had this happen a little bit where I've just kind of ignored it. And she's just like, well, just kind of like glad I told her, but let's see what happens. Okay. And sure. It would stay for a little bit and then go away. And, I don't know, all my life, until the invention of the patch, if I went deep sea fishing or something like that, I get seasick and stuff like that. And so I started thinking it's a feeling like that. So I just thought, well, maybe I'm just not feeling well.
And we all justify things to fit the story that we want to believe, right? So yes, exactly. There we are.
Exactly.
Anywho, so then what drove you to finally see a physician?
So let's speed up just a little bit. A couple of months later, because I'd have these kind of, they didn't always appear, right? And so we had gone to Florida and gone swimming in a swimming pool, and I went in the ocean a couple of times, and I went back to the swimming pool, that type of thing. And when we came back from that trip, I had noticed when I was down there the feeling like, if you ever felt like you have water in the ear and it won't go away. Well, that's what I was feeling like, and I was just like, oh, it's just a matter of time. And well, the matter of time didn't happen, and so I bought some over-the-counter stuff and was using that, and it still was feeling like I had water in my ear. And I'm like, it was a ringing and just a kind of a strange sort of sensation that if you've ever had water in your ear, that's exactly what it felt like.
And it's so irritating. So you lived with that for how long?
Oh, let's say about 4 months.
Oh my God. Okay. I thought you were going to say 2 weeks.
Oh,
okay,
no.
Got it.
I'm like, this is going to go away eventually. And then I just was kind of dealing with it. And so sometimes it was more annoying than others. And eventually I'm just like, I got to get this looked at, because I was thinking that, there's any number of things with the ear. Plus, I've always been somebody who listened to headphones. And I was thinking, maybe I did something to my ear that, from listening to music too loud or something like that. And so I go to see my doctor, and my doctor, I go in, and he says, I think I know what this is, but I really can't diagnose you for this, because this is my thing. But he asked me a couple of questions. He said, he asked me about the balance, if I was having some problems. And as he started asking me these questions, I started paying attention to some of the things I did have. So for example, like if I went to step out of the car, there were a couple of times when I kind of like fall into the door, and I'm like, well, that's weird. And so I explained some of that stuff to him. He says, yeah, that's sounding a lot like what this is. And so he told me what he thought it was. And he said, but I'm not the one who can diagnose you. We need to send you to an ear person and an ear doctor. And so he did. And it was just funny, because he told me, he said, I think this is an acoustic neuroma. And he said, but let's let an expert on the area talk to you. So I go to see a specialist, an ear specialist, and it was interesting because I got to see an auditory. Not quite sure what her title is, but an auditory specialist, the ones who they hook you up, all, the little things in your ear, and then they put you in the booth, and then they sit on the outside, and then they tell you to push the little button when you hear the beeps, And on the left ear, everything was great. On the right ear, if you ever saw the movie Empire Strikes Back, the Star Wars movie, it sounded like one of the Empire's droids in my ear. It's like,
Oh my
it's
goodness.
like, what the heck is that?
And so did that surprise you, Steve?
It did.
When you, okay.
Oh, it very much surprised me because I wasn't thinking, I mean, I was starting to have, remember, I waited a little bit of time, but I'd had dinner with my family and stuff, and I had dinner with friends, and I had to make sure I was sitting so that people were on my left-hand side because I was hearing better. And so I was just thinking that I damaged my hearing type of thing.
But you hadn't heard the droids before.
No, I had not.
Okay.
I had not. That came from her putting that focused on that ear. And I the funny thing is, I'm not quite sure she knew what I was referencing when I said.
Right. Well, that's a shame. That's a shame on her. But two quick things. One, good for your internist. Your primary care doc was not knew what this was. That's pretty amazing. And I forget what two was, but let's keep going.
Okay.
It'll come back to me. It happens all the time.
Not a problem. So I go see this doctor, and I saw his audiologist. There we go. That's the name of her specialty. And so she has a report, and she shows me that, I'm getting so little sound through this ear that I'm hearing because my left ear is picking up the slack type of thing. And right. And they, so I go to see him, it's all in the same office. So I then go into his office, and I had to have an MRI done. All right. So he's looking at the MRI, and he says, well, he goes, I need to tell you something. He goes, I'm a specialist on the ear, which is the outer ear. He goes, he said, so I need to tell you that your ear is fine. He said, your eardrum, all of it is doing what it's supposed to do. The problem is that you have something internal that's going wrong. And then he showed me on the MRI where I had this little spot, and the little white spot, he said that thing should not be there. And it's about the size of a marble.
Wow. Okay.
And that's how he described it too. He said, it's about the size of a marble. See that right there? And I said, yes. He goes, that's not supposed to be there. And he said, that is interfering. He said, that is something growing on your nerve that feeds your ear and that lets the ear do its work. And he's like, so that's not my area. So we have to send you to somebody else. And
okay. So were there any other symptoms except for the partial loss of hearing and ringing and dizziness? Was there anything else that you remember?
Just balance problems.
Balance. Okay.
And so just to know, it's like, when you're walking and you're trying to walk straight, and for some reason, you
just can't.
No,
it's like doing dizzy bat. Where you
yes,
and you go around 10 times, and then you try to walk, you're like, there's the straight, but you just can't do it.
No. And so it wasn't that apparent like dizzy bat. It was one of those things where you kind of go to walk straight and you lean to the right, and it's like, well, what the heck is that? And I do a lot of walking, and I'm a big baseball fan, and so we were going to the baseball park and stuff like this, and I tell my wife, I said, I really have kind of leaning to the right here. And so we'd kind of balance me with, I'd carry one of the bags on the other side, and it kind of helped. But I had to be very specific about walking straight. All right. And, concentrate on it.
And this is before you went to the doctor.
Correct. And I didn't really, but I didn't really think about it. I just thought, this is just something. Who knows?
Yeah. So when that audiologist said your ear was fine, that's wonderful news. But then to see this MRI with the marble-sized object that, in his or her words, shouldn't be there. So that's when, did they use the word, neurosurgeon at that point? Or what were you feeling then? How did you feel? Do you remember?
Oh, I remember very well, because it was, I'm not someone who goes to the doctor a lot. And about 2 years before, I fell off of a ladder holding onto a tree and injured my leg. And I saw a bunch of doctors then. But I still, you're talking to someone who, that's something that's fixable, right?
Right.
And
yep. It's concrete. It's kind of black and white. This is not black and white. Although, ironically, the MRI was probably black and white. But that was the only thing that's black and white in this situation.
Very true. And he showed me what this was, a cross section of, and that, here's your brain, and here's this little dot. And it's like, I'm like, well, that's wild. And he told me, he said, he goes, this is out of my specialty range. And he gave me some information, and he said, I can explain to you what this is and isn't. He said, this is where I first hear that this is not cancer. He said, but he said to me, he said, we also don't really know a whole lot about why these happen. He said, if you had them in both ears, then it's genetic. And then he said, but in one ear, and he said, there's specialists on this, and we have a couple of specialists in the Atlanta area, and he said, you need to choose, because I'm going to send you to one of them. And so, ended up choosing, the ear first. He told me that at some point in here, you're going to be seeing a neurologist, but at this point he's talking about a doctor who specializes on the inner ear.
Okay.
And, in that ear canal and those, nerves and such. And,
Got it.
and so we picked that doctor, and I get to go see him. And so basically I see him, and he says, we're going to do an MRI, and we're going to watch it for a couple months to see what happens. And so that's what happened. So he used that first MRI to look at it.
Baseline.
What's that?
As a baseline.
Yes, as a baseline. And that's exactly what they did, because they measured that one as that little marble. And then when I go and get the next MRI, which happens sometime early fall.
So how many months in between the MRIs?
So May to September.
Okay. And by the time you got your second MRI, it was the size of?
Size of a mushroom.
Wow.
Yeah. And he said this is quite common of what, and that's why I'm thinking that it was actually October when this happened.
Okay.
And so he says, he shows it to me, and he says, this is what this thing does. He said, it's growing at a rapid pace. And I don't know the sizes on the top of my head right now,
right.
But it had gone from a little marble to the size of a nice size little mushroom.
Solid mushroom.
Yes.
That's terrifying.
It is. And he said it's pushing against your brain. And he said it's growing around this nerve. And he said, so we're going to start talking about how we're going to deal with this. And so he said, when I am working on this type of situation, and he said, there's a neurosurgeon that I team up with. And he said, so I'm going to want you to meet with him also.
Okay.
And he looked at my MRI as well. So yes, this is when you go from suddenly not really meeting with doctors to now suddenly you're talking people who talk about the brain, and a neurosurgeon who is the brain doctor.
Yeah. And not just the brain doctor, but the brain operator.
Yes.
Right? Like someone who operates, and that's.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so this all happened within like 5 months.
Correct. It was
from the time you started this journey to meeting with the neurosurgeon.
Right. It's like 5 to 6 months altogether. And and so by November, I'm having these meetings with. I've had a couple different meetings with them individually, and then what happens is that I have a meeting with them together with my wife, and we had decided. And what they told me was, they said, you need to understand, and that this needs to come out, and it needs to be deadened by radiation. And so we have two choices. We have choice of removing it or trying to use radiation on it. And so this is, once again, you're asking how I feel. This is when you're starting to think, this is not, drink this and calm, take two and in the morning, call me or something like this. And
this is a literal crossroads in your life.
Yes, very much so.
This decision, I mean, maybe you feel like there really wasn't a decision, radiation versus surgery, or both, but surgery then radiation, or radiation then surgery. But it's so. Did they give you a choice at that point?
Oh, they did. They said, we need to talk about this, because they said your age, at the time I was 58. Okay. And they said, your age is where you're young enough. I love those words. They said,
I know, right?
Yes. They said, you're young enough that you should, that we're really thinking surgery as opposed to radiation. They said, because radiation sometimes what happens is that it deadens it, but the tumor comes back, and then they have to deal with operating around dead tissue and removing that tissue as well as removing the live tissue. And so I'm like, well, that's a nice choice. And they said, and then, if you were older, and they're very honest with me, and they're saying, your time is a little more limited, that we'd be talking that, because we wouldn't be talking surgery at all. But they said, you're young enough that your body can heal from the surgery, and then we see if it comes back or not. But they were encouraging me to do that because of the possibility of it coming back and then having to deal with the dead tissues in there, which cause complications. Well, when they talked about that, it's kind of like, okay, so let's really think about this. So we had another meeting where both of them were in the room, and my wife and I had talked, and it's kind of like, this makes no sense, because basically one of the things they told me was, if you, first I had to decide which way I wanted to go, and I told them, I'd said I'd like to have it operated on and removed, and so they, it was funny because by the way, both of these doctors had great senses of humor. All right,
oh, that's good to hear.
It is, and I'm somebody who, I guess, I try to make light of problems, and so I was asking goofy questions, like things like, because they started talking to me about if they operate, what that's going to be like. And so before I made this decision, I was joking with them to see if, see if I'm comfortable with them. I mean, because,
sure.
And it was really cool because they both had great senses of humor, and whether I annoyed them or not was not apparent, because they either recognized what I was talking about or joked with me. But, and I'll get to more of that in just a second, but they, basically what they said is that you've got about probably 2 years. And if we wait that long, that tumor is going to be much, much bigger. And it has, not only is it going to destroy the nerve for the hearing on the right side, but it's also going to, right behind that nerve is this facial nerve that controls the right side of your face. And they said, if it destroys that, then it's going to be like a stroke on your side of your face. You'll lose all control of the right side of your face. And that's what made me go, okay, I don't think we need to even leave this office to decide. But my wife and I had already decided that I would have the surgery. But they said, glad to hear it, because if we had, because then they said, well, when do you want to do this? How soon? And I said, I just want to do it as soon as possible. So we're in late November now of 22 when I'm talking about. And they were able to, and they liked that too, by the way, because then that made it possible for them to, schedule that within a time in which it probably shouldn't grow too much faster than what it already was. So we talked about it and scheduled it for February of 2022.
Okay. So a couple of things listening to you. First of all, any physicians who are listening, I'm sure paid attention, I hope, to what you said. You basically were saying, my life is in these people's hands, and I needed to make sure I was comfortable with them. And med schools I have a master's in healthcare administration. I feel like I need to say that because,
Nice.
And I worked in healthcare for 10 years before I say what I'm about to say, which is medical schools have gotten so much better about this and understanding not only the business side, but obviously the quote unquote bedside manner. But that is literally how you made your decision about these people, is how they interacted with you on a personal level. So the acumen, the surgical acumen, in my opinion, is assumed, right? So everyone at this level should have X level of acumen. This is the next level of feeling comfortable with someone or not. You could have gone with someone who you didn't care for, but you wouldn't have felt as good about it. So any physicians and or nurses who are listening, I feel like I had to make that point because it is important. I agree with you. You and I are very similar that way. Two other things. One, my understanding is that the surgery, if it was too close to the nerve. They could have nicked the nerve and caused the same paralysis. Did they talk about that, or did you feel like it was a non-issue?
Yeah, they didn't talk about that.
Okay.
They basically said, yeah, oh, I just you're kind of going back to something I said before. I mean, we're talking inside my head. They're talking about the brain. There's only one of those, and it's like, and I'm thinking all kinds of things, because it's like, you do hear about things where something gets off slightly or something happens, and there's any number of those things, and that's what going back to something you just asked about. I mean, it was feeling comfortable with them talking with me about how this is going to work, and so like I was saying things to them. So I have to say this, because this is the part where I think they did a great job of helping me understand, because only a couple times did I meet with them together until the day of the surgery, in which then I saw them together again. But before that, so I'm meeting with them individually, and it was interesting, because they talked to me about how, in order to do this type of surgery, they had to decide where they go in, and there's only two areas that they really do. One is like right above the ear, or right close in that area, and the other one's right behind the ear, and that they would make a hole and they go in that way is one of the options, because of how the skull is, how it looks, how it's structured. Thank you. That would be a good way of saying it. Mm-hmm. And so they were talking about this, and I said, okay, I need to ask a question here. I said, are you like holding a drill and going in my my head?
You wanted a visual.
Yes,
right.
Yes. And he said, well, kind of. We got to make a hole, and then and they use the big terms. Go in there, identify it, liquefy it, and then pull it out. And because I was thinking that you're going to make this big old hole, and I said to him, I said, am I going to be like Cousin Eddie? And he said, no, you're not going to be like Cousin Eddie, because he knew what I was saying. I said, am I going to have like this little metal door back here? And Cousin Eddie had this metal plate on his head, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, that's from Christmas Vacation. Yeah. And Cousin Eddie supposedly had a steel plate in his head, and so I was wondering if I was going to have like a steel plate where it was a little door that they could open and close, so they could go back in there if they ever needed to. And he said,
"It's not a bad idea."
Yeah, and he laughed and said, "No. Yeah, you're not going to be Cousin Eddie." And it was just that he got my idea of what I was talking about. It was also cool, because
you're like, okay, he watches those movies. I like this guy.
Yes, and so I happened to say something. Well, you don't drink a lot of coffee on those days, do you? And no. He goes, well, yeah, I do drink a lot of coffee, but we're good. Not that close to surgery and stuff like that. And and the surgery itself ended up taking 10 hours. They spent 10 hours on me, and they talked a little bit about that beforehand, and that how long it could take. And I'm like, how do you do that? And it's 10 hours, because part of it is taking breaks to get themselves refocused and so forth. And I said, so it's not a good time to sneeze either, is it? And he said, no.
They're like, we love this guy.
Yeah. So their reaction is making me feel better, because I references
so
to
that was the way you dealt with your discomfort too.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
Is to use humor or sarcasm, that kind of thing. That has often been referred to as an intelligent person's response to fear. I don't know if that's true or not. I think in your case it is. But it's a defense mechanism, which is completely understandable. Did COVID have any, because that COVID was still...
Oh yeah, we were wearing masks.
Right?
Yeah,
right. So did that have any impact on anything in this process?
The biggest impact it had was when I went to the hospital, had rules about how you had to be checked for COVID before the surgery. And so when you went to report for surgery, before you could go in there, you had to go to the other this other door where there's a guy in a big suit standing and looking,
hazmat, covered goggles. Yeah,
exactly. Questioned me to make sure that I was in the right area where I was supposed to be, and I said yes. I have to report for. In that case, it was a Friday. I had to be there to be tested for COVID, and then on Tuesday was when I had the surgery. And so what they were doing was that once you have the test, then you had to stay isolated away from people and until the surgery, so that it didn't give you false positives, or that you didn't accidentally come in contact with it, I guess. So that was the biggest thing. And then I didn't have it, but I got to have the swab stuck up my nose.
Sure. How long did you have to stay in isolation?
Just Friday to Tuesday. And I was fine with being around. The doctors told me, they said, you're fine being around your family. They said, it's just don't go out to public and stuff like that.
Right.
And
okay. So it's not like you were in a room by yourself or something like that. Right. Okay.
Yeah. They told me you don't have to worry about that. They said, just hang around the house and do things around the house.
Okay.
And that's what we did. And
okay. So, and the two people who were attending the surgery, well, there were probably 12 people attending the surgery between anesthesiologists, nurses, et cetera, but was the neurosurgeon and the inner ear person?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And they wanted both of them there because both pieces of your body were involved?
Well, they have, yes. And they each have roles in this. And this is what was fascinating to me, by the way, because the inner ear guy, he would, they agreed on where to go into the brain from.
Mm-hmm.
But so he took it from there in the beginning to get in, and then the neurosurgeon took over once they were in to mess around inside. And
Wow.
and I asked, by the way, this is another one of the comments, because he started talking about how I have the cell tissue; those are my cells there, and so therefore, because I said, am I going to get like something to take home with me in a jar or something like this?
Yeah, like a door prize. I mean, come
Right.
on, geez.
And they said, oh, no. And I said, well, you keep talking about my cells. I said, now you're not cloning me, are you? And I said, no, this is not, this is not Westworld.
And your wife said, oh my God, no, please.
Yeah, exactly. I said, this is not Westworld or something like that. And I said, well, I just want to make sure, because you keep, and it was fascinating because whatever material they took out as they went in, they kept it, and then they made a paste out of it, and then they put it all back together again. And they said that the way your skull is able to fix itself like that by putting this back together like that. And it takes a little bit of time, but that's why they have these different roles. So they do these different parts. And like my neurosurgeon said, he goes, just remember, I'm the brain guy.
Yeah.
And the nerve guy, he's the ear guy. All right. So I have to take over in those parts. And by the way, the next time I saw both of them together was the day of the surgery. I had to report it. I had to be there by 5:15 in the morning. Mm-hmm. And and that strangest feeling though, to go into a place and not feeling too bad, a little wobbly or whatever, but come out a little jacked up. That's probably the best way to describe that.
Let's talk. I want to back up a little bit, because there are a couple of things I want to talk about. You're going through all this, but your family is going through all this at the same time. Your wife is concerned about losing her husband, and if she doesn't lose her husband, who you guys have been together a long time, I know, how is he going to be different after, right? So, and your kids, what were those conversations like? And if you don't want to share them, that's fine. But how did you tell your kids what was going on?
Well, just had a conversation with them and tried not to be, too melodramatic or anything like that. And my kids are in their, my oldest is getting ready to turn 30 this year. And so you subtract 2 off of that. So he's about 28. And at the time, my youngest is 26 now. And so he was about 24. And, basically just told him what's getting ready to happen. And then we'll have to see what happens. The recovery process is going to take a couple months, and I'll be home for a bunch of those weeks from work and stuff, and we'll see what happens. And they were all very supportive and helpful, and we just kind of went into this like you're going into the grocery store or something like this, and except this time you're leaving Dad, so
and so it sounds like true to your form, they followed suit, that they were. Whatever happened in their minds privately is their private thoughts. So you just presented that this needs to be done.
Right.
And it's just part of the deal.
Right.
And we're all going to get through it.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it right there. And it's, the doctors were very good about saying about, this is what they do. They're specialists in this. This is what they do. And they didn't, except for talking about most, he was going to do his best to try and conserve some of my hearing if there's any there. But at the same point, he's like, we're going to get this out of there, and then and things should go, and we get you back on the right path. And it was just with their positiveness, that's what I went in with it. The thinking is that just
again the importance of having a solid team behind you, because they're the lead, but really you're the lead.
Right.
It's a symbiotic relationship even though you're dependent on them. To me, it's a symbiotic relationship. What about, right. I don't know anything about your religion or faith, religion versus faith, religion and faith. What role, if any, did that play in this process?
Well, I think it, I'm Christian, and it's one of those things where, kind of like it's time to say, to ask for some help and strength, and I had a nice little prayer session as I'm sitting in the hospital, and when the doctors came, well, actually a couple nights before that, actually after the diagnosis too, but it's when I went the day of the surgery, when I was in there, I think more than anything, when it becomes real and you're sitting in the room, they call you back, and they have you put on a nice little gown.
And ugliest things ever.
Yes.
Not flattering at all. Go ahead.
And so I'm sitting in there freezing,
yeah.
And the curtain opens and they're both there. And it's funny because one's tall, one's not. All right. So they make it a unique group as
Laurel
they come in.
And Hardy.
Yes. And so they walk in and they said, they chit-chatted with me for a minute and said some funny things. And then they said, well, we're really here so we can decide where we're going in. And so they actually use a marker on my side of my head. And what was funny was I'm like, it felt like they were getting ready to play tic-tac-toe on me or something. I watched too many Looney Tunes cartoons, and it's like, and so that made it feel good. And then shortly after that, I'm wheeled out, and I go meet the anesthesiologist, and I literally have, until I wake up, I have no memories of except pretty much after I leave them, because at some point they put me on a cart where I'm rolled down the hallway, and that's pretty much where my memories stop.
Yeah, and often they give a sedative before they do the anesthesia so that there's less stress. So the marker on your head, for people who have not had surgery, was born out of making sure that that physicians and hospitals operate on the correct leg or correct ear, because there have been many lawsuits in that regard. So that makes sense that they were marking up your which ear and where they were going to go in.
And that's what they joked about, by the way. When they're talking that morning, there's like, this is to make sure we are operating on the correct side.
I know. And the funny thing is, it's not a joke. Anyway, so back to the religious thing, because you kind of brushed over that. You said there were some prayer sessions. Were those organized prayer sessions, or was it just between you and
between me and God?
Okay, which is fair. That's wonderful. Before this, had you had those conversations with your entity?
Not really.
Okay. Have you since?
Yes.
Okay.
Prior to that, it was all about family members and all that sort of stuff and things going on in the world, and never really about me. And that changed a little bit.
Did you feel selfish when you were doing that?
Maybe a little bit, but I really didn't think about it. It just had to do with wanting to
asking for help.
Right. And getting through this, type of thing. Because, it's one thing to be in there and joking and getting ready for whatever's going to happen and then being put to sleep. And, it's a whole nother thing because I had no clue what's going to happen when I wake up.
Well, and I want to be clear, when I just asked if you felt that was being selfish, I asked that specifically because you said you had never focused on yourself.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone listening would ever think that were a selfish thing to do. It's a comforting thing to do. But I was asking from your perspective. So that's all completely understandable. So you went into the surgery on the day. This is on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest. How scared were you?
Oh, I can tell you. I was trying not to be. I took a book with me to read because I'm left at the. I go in, sit down, and then they leave because you don't know how long I'm going to be there, and so I took a book with me. Couldn't read. I couldn't read whatsoever. I was just looking at all the people in that waiting room because there are lots of them with family and suitcases and all kinds of things, and I'm just like looking around, just trying to keep myself focused on all the issues that other people are having, and so I would say if you put me on a scale, I'm up there in a, if one's the lowest and we're going the other direction, I'm somewhere around an 8. Sitting there, and the more interaction I had, the less, it kind of lessened a little bit because like there was a nurse who saw me and told me about putting on the gown and all that sort of stuff, and then there was and then the doctors came in and joked about the marking on me, but yeah, I'm feeling it again right now.
Yeah. Are you feeling it as we're talking about it?
Oh yeah, it's all come back.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, it's all right.
That's why I asked Steve ahead of time if anything was off limits, and he said no, which is why we're going down some of these roads. But I knew that, I figured that some of these feelings would return. But it sounds like taking action in any way, shape, or form, whether it was looking at other people and saying, well, they're probably worse off than I am, or, speaking to God, or talking to the nurse, or, the marker and the tic-tac-toe. Taking action gives you some sense of control in a situation in which you have pretty much no control.
Right. Very much
Which
so.
is very scary for someone who is used to being in control, not only of his faculties, but of some of the events in his life. It's completely understandable. Did you do any, or do you do any journaling or writing during this time?
Yeah, none at this time. I do journaling with what I do for work. I write down thoughts about things that I've done and how I could do them better and stuff like that. But I didn't do any of that with this. And it's when you got to the other side of this, it has an impact on my ability to focus on written words and stuff like this. And when you're ready to go that direction, I can. But it's I didn't do any of that.
Okay. So I did want to talk about, so you obviously went through the surgery and it was successful and they got it all out. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. It's, and we've had, I just had my, this past May, I just had my 1 year, with the neurosurgeon. I had a 6 month with the inner ear doctor and the 1 year with him. And so I had to have MRIs in there, and, they were very happy, because first of all, after the surgery, the neurosurgeon told me that he got all of it. He said, it's all gone. And he said, now we'll just have to see if it grows back or not. And it did not grow back. And
great.
so the 1 year anniversary, where they both announced that now I'll just see them, basically over the next 10 years, every year, right? Once a year.
Well, congratulations. That's
Thank
fantastic.
you.
I'm sure you were elated.
Yes, I was.
Ebullient, all the big E words, excited.
Yes.
Ecstatic. Well, there are a lot of E words. Anyway, that's great. So after the surgery, you wake up. Was your family there? What was the first thought? It was probably fuzzy, but when you woke up, what was the experience like?
When I woke up, there's an orderly in the room, and I can hear, that's what helps wake me up. I hear somebody moving around. When I open my eyes, if you're looking at something, like in this case, there was a clock across from my bed, but it looked like the clock was on the ceiling, and that I was looking at the ceiling, and I was like, what in the, and I kind of closed my eyes, and I felt seasick. All right. If you've ever had that nauseated feeling, once I opened my eyes, that's when that feeling came. And it looked like the room was flipped. Because when I kind of looked around, it wasn't just the clock that looked on the ceiling. It looked like I was looking at them, the room being flipped. So at first I thought maybe I was strapped to something and like I was inverted or something like this, but that wasn't the case. I closed my eyes and I opened them and it still was like that. And I'm slowly really kind of waking up, and eventually what happens, and the orderly realizes I'm waking up, and he says hi to me and welcome back. And he says, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. And
did you say fix the room? It's upside down. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, not a problem. He goes and gets somebody who then comes in and lets me know that that's normal, that that it'll fix itself. And so, kind of like in 30 minutes, the room stopped doing that. And
did they say why it happened in the first place?
Yeah, the doctors explained to me that they gave me a concussion basically, and so that's my brain trying to recover from it and dealing with it.
You did not know this ahead of time?
No.
Do you wish you had known that ahead of time?
I don't. I think what I don't know, because I don't know how you would tell somebody that, oh, by the way, when you open your eyes, the room's going to be upside down, and you might feel like you're out at sea or something like that. And I don't know. I can tell you that as I have some giant bandage on my head that I never saw. I never got to see what I looked like with it. You could feel it was there. And the neurosurgeon explained to me that's an ear guy thing. He said they want you to have this big giant bandage on your head, and so I had that. So it made me kind of lean towards one side. It was hard to lean back on that, and but I was in that. They had moved me in because they didn't have space in the regular part of the hospital, so I was in ICU for these couple of days. So I'm in this giant room, it's meant for emergencies, and eventually they moved me to a room. But it was a weird thing, because at first if I didn't feel like eating, please don't give me anything. It's like, and they kept trying to get me to eat, and I couldn't eat anything. I mean, some of it looked so yummy.
Is it because you felt nauseous, or
part of it just was like, I didn't want anything. I'm like,
didn't want to eat. Okay.
I just looked at things and was like, this is just weird. And when I get moved into the room, that's probably where some of the strangest things in recovering kind of happen, because I had a roommate. There's somebody in there for some other things, and we had and so we couldn't have conversations. He had some serious thing going on too, but it was quite strange, because at first, I really didn't have some massive pain in my head. I don't know how to describe that. And I wasn't on some painkillers or anything like that, because I was thinking that maybe, it just felt weird. I just had brain surgery, and I'm coming out, and I have this big bandage on my head, and the room would spin once in a while. I'd have to close my eyes, and closing my eyes didn't help, because when I'd open them, then the room would be flipped again. And I'm like,
How long did this go on?
I was in the hospital for 5 days, and
that's very serious. To be in the hospital for 5 days these days is a big deal. Yeah. And so the entire time this was happening?
Just the first 2 days.
2 days.
It eventually, by the second day, I'd open my eyes, and it might be flipped, but it would take seconds to correct itself.
And when it corrected itself, was it literally like at the snap of a fingers it would correct itself, or did things move slowly?
Nothing moved. You just close your eyes and then open them, and then it's like, oh, the clock's where it's supposed to be. It's like, yay!
Wow.
All right,
that's amazing.
So, success. Yeah. And I had, during this time, they had me on these steroids, and they explained to me that they were for healing, to help stimulate, to help the healing process. And so, in here at some point, I see my wife. At some point, I'm going to see my kids later in the week. There were some physical therapists who wanted me to stay through the weekend, and actually for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, I can't make it that long. I got to get out of here.
Got to get out of here.
And but there was I don't know what people's titles are, but wasn't the RN. although they were good. But there was like a nurse practitioner or someone whose job it was to keep an eye on my vitals and watch the IV fluids, and she would talk with me, and she helped me kind of start getting in the process of trying to stand up and things like this, and even come in late at night, and like I had a window, but I couldn't really. The window was down at the end of my bed, but I could kind of, if I leaned up, I could look out that window because I didn't sleep much, and when I did sleep, this is where I was going with that. I had these weird nightmares. I had, and this is going to make me sound crazy, but I had monsters in my dreams. And
it's not crazy at all, Steve.
I had monsters.
You've been through hell.
Yeah, I had monsters in my dreams since I was a kid. And I don't mean like Dracula or Frankenstein or something like this, or some of the modern versions of monsters. I had these weird, just like strange, glowy creatures in my brain that just would make me, startle me awake. And the surgeon told me, he said, that's the steroids. He said, people talk about that a lot. And he said, just wait. He goes, when you get them off the steroids, then you'll have some new nightmares. And
great.
Yeah. And he was right. The monsters went away. And as I no longer have the steroid, then I have these dreams that I have all this work that I'm supposed to be working on. And I kept thinking that I had all this stuff due. And that would wake me up. And because what would happen is in these dreams, all these people that I've known all my life would suddenly pop up that I haven't seen in, in years, if not, ever since whenever. And that's what would help me realize, what am I doing? These are dreams. This is, I kind of woke myself up from those. But it was because that part went on for a while. That went on for about, once the monsters were gone with the steroids, these other weird nightmares happened even when we went home from the hospital. Listen to me, when I went home.
Well, yeah, but it was a collective effort, right? Did the physicians say why those nightmares were happening? Was it in response to the trauma?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's the brain responding to the trauma that it's gone through, and so it's just a matter of time. And they, anytime I talk to them, they'd say these are all things that people have told us before. Normal. It's very normal, and then eventually it goes away, and it did. I had one of the things that happened to me out of this is I get these headaches, and they were really severe then, and they had certain things that they were giving me to help keep those under control, like some super strength this or super strength that. I found out that you really couldn't mix these things because if you did, it would increase the nausea. So you went from one pain to another type of pain. Yeah. And it's still interesting because since I've recovered and all this stuff, and they started me on this then, I could either take a medicine that had caffeine added in it, which they recommended, or they also recommended just doing it old school, which is drinking something with a lot of caffeine in it. So like
to widen the pathways, because that's what caffeine does, right? So headaches the blood vessels are narrowed, right? So that helps to open them and relieve the pressure on them.
Cool. That's what I didn't know, but I do. And the last time I saw my surgeon, he was still good because I'm like, I keep with me. I'm kind of addicted to Coke Zero seems to this. Yeah. I'm not sponsored by Coke Zero, but
but if they're interested,
yes, if they're interested, I'd be happy to. But
I too wouldn't mind a sponsor, but that's another topic. Go ahead.
Nice, but I drink Coke Zero, and it helps when I start getting the headaches. It helps. It goes away pretty fast. Whereas tea takes a little while, but it seems to have enough in it that it zaps me, as opposed to Diet Coke. It doesn't do that. It takes a while for that too.
So is it the caffeine or is it something else in it?
It's a caffeine. He told me it's caffeine. Yeah.
So this also is typical of people who've been through what you've been through?
Yes.
Does it go away? Did they say it'll go?
Yeah, it said eventually it will. It takes a couple of years, a year to two. So
okay. How has your sense of time, we're going to talk about physical stuff, but how has your sense of time and the value of time changed, if it has, since this happened?
I think the biggest thing is that, first of all, it's kind of shocking that I had all this happen. All right. So, because once again, I can't say enough about how they were working on my brain. You know, when I met with the doctors the last time, and especially the neurosurgeon the last time, you know, I said to him, I said to both of them, I thanked them because I said, I can't imagine the skills that you have to have in order to do this. And then I said, plus, you know, to have me now, I mean, I have colleagues who can't believe, you know, that I'm walking, talking, and joking and doing my thing. And because there was a time where I had to have help figuring out how to walk. And, you know, I couldn't walk to the end of my driveway, you know, without a walker or without assistance. And then, you know, slowly graduated to that. So it really makes you appreciate something like this reprieve you've been given, or whatever you want to call it. And it's, so I don't know if that answered your question or not, but it makes it valuable.
No, I think it's a wonderful answer, and the word reprieve is a really interesting choice from you. So we kind of brushed over the recovery. You were in the hospital, but when you got home, can you talk about the physical, mental, emotional? Did you have a counselor at any point along the way? You know, a psychologist to talk to, or a spiritual leader, or just all of the aspects around recovery? Can you address those?
So I'm kind of a person who's like, I can do this. And, you know, kind of like the old song, with little help from my friends type thing. But, you know, it's, but at the same time, so as far as I didn't have a counselor, I could have if I wanted to. I didn't have anybody really talking to me spiritually. I pretty much was like, I can do this. And my wife was tremendous help in helping me try and do different things. Because I you know, talk about showering. I mean, I had to sit, you know, and it's like, and that in itself was irritating. So all this stuff is like, I mean, some of the biggest problems I had was that, you know, I had to worry about feeling nauseated. I couldn't look at a computer, by the way. Computer was off limits. The doctors told me that right from the bat. They said, you do not need to be looking at a computer. You do not need to be trying to do work, because your brain's going to say, no, you know, you're cheating, you know, and it's going to make you dizzy. And it did if you tried. And so I also couldn't read. I couldn't look at written words. You know, I'm someone who likes, you know, DVDs of movies and TV shows and things like this. I could only take it for so long. All right. I could watch a little bit of it, but then I'd have to put that away too. And so I ended up, in the beginning, by the way, I just didn't want to do much of anything. And they had to help me. You know, the great thing about being home is that you have all this furniture where you know where it is and you kind of place it. So if you're trying to walk, because I was trying to do it without a walker, because it's like, this is annoying. I don't need that. And so in the beginning, I kind of bounced off of furniture and, you know, and the walls and things like that to go from one place to another, but I didn't really move a lot. And so I'd have to have help to do that. But, you know, it was just if you've ever been seasick, that's what it felt like, a really bad case of it, where you're like, you don't want to move around, you don't want to do anything. And so you know, what's funny is I started realizing, well, so my wife helped me with this. I love LPs. And so I have my turntable, and I would listen to LPs and get caught up on on some of my record collection and stuff like that. And that worked pretty good. And then, you know, I kind of nod off in there or something like that.
Were you sleeping a lot at the time?
Yes, very much so.
So all of your symptoms are, like they said, the physician said earlier, are concussion symptoms, right?
Yes.
You can't look at a screen. You can't watch TV for very long periods of time. You're having trouble. It is, you know, it also occurred to me when you were talking, you said, I had to sit in the shower, and that was so irritating. And it made me think, you know, what we, one, take for granted, right?
Yes.
And two, what it means to be human, you know, and humanity is so important, but being able to stand on your own as a human is also important. And that's, you know, you were the recipient of so much humanity from other people, but perhaps you felt like, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but this is what occurred to me, that you were losing your humanity because you were sitting in the shower and you couldn't, the things that made you, what it is that makes us, was temporarily unavailable to you, and you were very motivated to get it back. Is that true?
That's a good way of saying it, because it was, I had that big bandage off my head before I came out of the hospital, and that was a fun day because all these interns came to watch it be removed.
Oh, you were special.
Oh, yes. And so they're not even there really for me. They're there so they get a chance to learn from the surgeon. But I would say you're right on the money with that, because it's like, one of the things it's hard when you're sitting at home and you're trying to just, I had to have help walking. Eventually we go outside, and I have to have help to go down the stairs to get outside. And then I'm trying to walk from my driveway to my mailbox. Something that I never thought, would take a lot of thinking about. And it did. It took thinking about to stay focused, to stay upright, because in the beginning I used a walker, and then eventually I'm like, I got to get away from this. And so, kind of getting back to what you asked me before, I wasn't thinking about, needing somebody to help me get through certain feelings. Instead, I was like, I just want to make this happen, because I'm tired of not being able to walk from the end of my driveway back, to go from one end of the driveway to the other without stumbling or worrying about falling was very irritating. Eventually I graduated from that, though, and started walking with my wife on a park track that they had. That was interesting in the beginning, because I could only go like a quarter part of and they had benches, and so I'd sit and wait for her to catch up, to go around and come back, and then we'd try a little further, and then eventually graduated to being able to go around that. And
why did you have to sit? Were you tired, or were you dizzy, or both?
Get dizzy.
Okay.
It had more to be dizzy, especially because I had to focus on walking straight. And
right.
It was like
a lot of energy. A lot of energy.
And it was just kind of a strange feeling. And it's, I remember we were at that park, and because the track wasn't huge, it's not a big like high school or college track or something like that. And so it's easier to think about how far you're trying to get and how far you can keep going. Well, they also have like a Frisbee golf course that goes in and around that area. And so like I was trying to focus on walking, and these guys are throwing these Frisbee golf discs not too far from me. And it's like, I think I'm going to wait until they until they throw them, and in case I wander into the middle of where they're throwing them or whatever. But it's kind of a unique feeling when you're kind of thinking, normally would I ever even think that I would accidentally stumble into the path of a Frisbee disc? No, maybe they might accidentally hit me with it if they weren't good at throwing it. But anyway, just
humility is a really leveling.
It really is. And so
really levels.
Once we started getting to that level, then at some point in there, I started having a physical therapist who works with me. And that's has its own humiliations, because they put a belt on you to make sure you don't fall, and they hold you from behind. But that had a lot to do with being able to, they were working on, one of the things that was a problem was being able to, my peripheral vision was gone. And so they work with you on turning your head and starting to work on getting your peripheral vision back. And that was interesting in itself, because that was, you had these different exercises and things like that to help you with that. So,
were you retraining your eyes?
Yes.
Or were you retraining your eyes to talk to your brain, or both?
Probably both, because it was the right side. The left side was fine.
It's fine. Okay.
Yeah, I could see all kinds of things over there, but turn to the right, nope. I'd have to do like that. And there's just a lot of unique things about this. Especially considering it became apparent eventually that I'm done with this physical therapy. Even though they wanted me to stay, I'm like, okay, I'm doing good here, and we can move on. And in the beginning,
how long did it take to get your peripheral vision back in your right eye?
Well, it started working pretty well, within a week, 2 weeks, probably about 2 weeks. Okay. But at the same time, it took several months for it to be something that, there were times during this that when I tried using my peripheral vision, I'd make myself start feeling nauseated or give myself the headaches.
Right.
And so it's just taking time. I don't have that problem now, but
And how long were you in physical therapy?
Just a couple weeks, probably.
Couple weeks. Okay.
Probably about 4.
Okay.
4 weeks altogether, where I was going
That's
twice a week.
not a lot. That's not a lot. That's great.
Yeah, I was doing it about twice a
You
week.
know, I was thinking when you were talking, I was thinking feelings are a luxury. You know, when you're in crisis mode and because you're a doer, you were goal oriented, you're like, I'm going to get to the mailbox and I'm going to do this. And feelings are often left behind because they're a luxury that you can entertain later.
Yeah.
And it's almost like sometimes we have to push them to the side in order to stay focused. And then later you can say, oh, that is how I felt, or that, you know.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, again, this is a vulnerable position you've put yourself in again, because you were ultimately in the most vulnerable position and you're doing it again. So I really appreciate that you did that. And so now what are the repercussions? You have lost all hearing in your right ear. Is that correct?
Yes, it's all gone. And it's and that's something that they did. They did a few tests on me to see if I had anything left, or if there's anything that they could save,
like a cochlear implant or anything like that.
Now I could go that direction.
Okay.
Right now I'm not. The doctors aren't talking to me about it much, and you know, hearing aids can't fix this. This is not something a hearing aid. You'd have to have a cochlear implant in order to transfer the sound from one side to the other. But the surgeon explained to me, he said, the left ear will do a really good job of fixing itself so that it's overcoming the missing sound from the other side as well as the balance. And so only when I'm really tired do I struggle sometimes. I still have the issue where I wander. All right. I'll
okay.
And I don't mean for long distances, but I'll literally, if I'm not thinking about it, all of a sudden I'm leaning to the right and whoop, focus again, get myself back on track. And then sometimes I can walk, a good chunk of the way down a hallway and not even have to think about it. But there are things that I find myself thinking about. Like when I go to get out of my car, I stop, I open the door, I stop, I turn, put my feet down, and then stand up. If I do that fast, I can cause myself to be seasick and stumble. And seasick's not the right word, just feeling a little nauseated.
Yeah.
But so there's things like that. I'm working on trying to figure out how to sleep. I haven't been sleeping very well. So.
And do you think it's related to this?
I think so. I think it has a lot to do with it. I think part of it has to do with, just not wanting to call it quits for the day. It's, I don't want to sound like I'm nuts, but it's like,
you're not nuts.
Close your eyes. Are they going to be what's going to be there when you open them again? So.
Meaning you're thinking that the upside downs might come back? Is that what you're thinking? Or you may go?
Just more of that seasick world, nausea, stuff like that, It's like, I don't know. It's just, and it's probably something that I could easily, I've been trying to force myself lately to find, the bed earlier, but it's like one of those things that it's like, it's just easier to, make myself fall asleep by, been reading, looking at the story or whatever, and then find out 3 hours later that you've been asleep for 3 hours and didn't realize it.
Yeah, been there, done that. Like, how did this happen? Where did I go?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting, though. Are there any other physical, not impairments, but vestiges of the surgery or the process? Anything left over?
I think the biggest problems I have are I get these headaches. I keep them under control with caffeine. If I'm out doing yard work, I have to, if I do too much bending over, like you're weeding or something like this, I can give myself these headaches where all of a sudden I feel my head feels wobbly, and it's just the bending over too much. I feel my head is wobbly, and I feel like something is. I don't even know how to describe this. It's just if I bend over too much like that, what ends up happening is I start getting this feeling in my head, like my head is like there's this hollowness to it, and it's painful. And a lot of times, what'll come with that is I'll start sneezing, and once I start sneezing or coughing, I really give myself these headaches and this pain, and it just drives me nuts. And the surgeons have told me it's all normal. And
the sneezing is part of this too?
Yeah, it's something my body's doing to react to it, and
that is fascinating. And I'm sorry that's happening to you, but it's fascinating.
but,
It sounds awful.
well, it is,
But
and it's quite annoying, especially
yeah,
because it happens like at some of the stupidest times where things are working really well. You're doing things, doing it. All of a sudden, you realize, okay, I need to chill out, and if I'm outside, there's this bench I have, and I'll sit down on it and take a break for a few minutes, but and then eventually it goes away. But I hate coughing or sneezing because it creates this hollow pain in
like
my head.
reverberation inside your head.
Yeah, something like that.
painful.
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. It's like, and once again, the surgeons were not, because I've told them, I said, they're worried about other things, and I tell them this stuff, and they're like, it's normal. So, but and they remind me. They say you have to remember we were inside your head, and and we access things. That's something. If you ever had that feeling of as Novocaine is wearing off, if you've had dental stuff done, my face on the side where I had the surgery,
is numb.
Yeah, almost for a good chunk of it for about 6 months, and then slowly it started getting better, where I was getting more feeling in it and stuff like this. But the whole time it felt like it was like you have Novocaine, when Novocaine's wearing off and you're feeling, you start stretching your mouth and stuff like this. And
I have that here, actually still have it. So I could because I had surgery there. I know exactly what you're talking about. I wish I didn't, but I do.
It's an interesting feeling.
Do you find that you are more patient with yourself? I would imagine you were very impatient with yourself prior to this. You were very, Steve, all right, get it done, move on. Here's the goal. Do you find that you are more patient with yourself? For example, getting out of the car, you know what you need to do. Do you give yourself time to do that?
Sometimes. Sometimes I get very frustrated. Because it's like I just know what I want to do, and it's an example is those sneezes. All right, because I can literally be trying to do something, and then the next thing I know is that starts happening, and then it stops me from being able to do things because it hurts, and it's like that's very frustrating because it's like I'm just trying to do this. Why that? That type of thing. So, but that's probably those types of things. Now, don't judge me about what I'm about to say, but I was trying to push myself so much that I'm like, all right, I got to do something simple. So that during a storm, this is when I was feeling a lot better about walking and all this sort of stuff. I decided to, I went outside and helped my son with a tree that had been kind of not toppled, but it was coming down a little bit. So I helped him pull it down, and then we actually pulled it down far enough and used a chainsaw on it to cut off make it big chunks and put it all the way on the ground. And it's not this giant tree. It was something about, probably about 14 foot tall, but not a real big tree. And, well, I decided to mess with it to kind of cut some of those branches off with the chainsaw. And my son wasn't there. He had to go. And so when he left me, I was inside the house. Well, I went back out there, and I discovered something about my balance, which was I was trying to push through a couple of branches and kind of move where I was standing, and I tripped. And it's awesome that chainsaws come with this thing that when you let go of the handle, it turns off.
Oh my God.
Because I fell. What happened is I fell, and that was a hill, and I rolled down the hill, and I couldn't get back up again. I was like, there's literally I felt like a turtle on its back, it's like, and it took a minute or two. I got my orientation came back, and I ended up putting back the chainsaw and leaving it for a few weeks. It's like, okay, I don't think I've graduated to that level yet.
That was probably smart.
Yeah,
That's terrifying. I can't believe you did that. I can believe you did that, but that's terrifying.
It is terrifying. I had a similar thing with a non-destructive device happen. I have one of those backpack blowers. So like a couple weeks after this, I'm like, well, let's go to the blower to get the leaves going. And I did something. I have one of the problems I have is that I can stumble easily. All right. So I take steps and I'm not thinking about it. That's where a stumble might happen. And so I have to explain to my colleagues stuff like this. I've not been drinking. You see me do this stuff. It's because it's kind of embarrassing. Well, I had a backpack blower on, and I was blowing the leaves, and I kind of turned too fast the other direction, and I fell on my back. And it's like, the nice thing is nobody was around me with a camera. So,
Well, I thought I have two more. I have two more questions.
cool.
One is when my mother, before she passed from Parkinson's, she was in advanced stages. And I said to her, what's the best thing that you've learned since having Parkinson's? And she said, she thought about it for a minute, and she said that people are very, very kind. That's what she said. So I asked the same question to you. What's the best thing you have learned since you've gone through all of this?
I can tell you that, it's a lot of people are kind. There's a lot of concern about how you doing and recovery, and is there something I can do to help you, and especially family members. And I can tell you that probably one of the most interesting things I've learned is that it's amazing that you can recover from things. Because in my case, it was, just a matter of time. And it's what when I talked with the surgeon the last time, I said, I can't thank you enough, because I was having colleagues tell me they didn't think they'd see me up walking around as soon as I was, and nevertheless driving a car and stuff like that. And, I think that just amazes me, because it's like, they went inside, and by the way, they described a lot more detail after I got out of the hospital and visited them, what they actually did to me. And I'm glad they waited till afterwards. So, but
you're right. The body healing itself. I remember a physician I worked with. Actually, it was at a medical software startup, and he said, the hardest thing about being a physician is knowing when to do nothing. There's only, and this is in Devil's Grace, one of my books. She says this because
Nice.
it stood out to me. The physicians are taught to heal, to fix, to patch, but at what point do they step back and let the body and the mind and the soul of the person aid in the healing, right? The body heals, but the attitude has so much to do with it too. And you went in with a can-do attitude, knowing or feeling that you were going to come out on the other side, and it was just a rock, a mountain in your path that you had to get over. And I commend you for that, because there are a lot of people who don't think that way, and that can have an impact on the outcome. So I think that, you had this yucky, horrible thing, but you and your family just were like, okay, well, it is what it is. It's like saying, why is this happening to me? A lot of people say that. You didn't, but a lot of people say that, but they don't say, why did I win $100,000 in the lottery? They don't ask those questions. They only ask when it's something negative. So yeah. I commend you really, truly, that you hit this head on with everything you had, and your wife and your family. And it's just, that's why I wanted people to know about it, because it's flipping amazing. You're amazing.
Thank you.
At the end of your emails, at the bottom of your LinkedIn and Pinterest and Twitter and Instagram and all that, you have this quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. You probably could say it, but do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail. So how common is this thing you had?
They say it's not common. They say that, but it is. It does happen, and it does. They bring them all kind of to this part of the world. These two people are some of the specialists on it, and it's. But it's something that So it's not like every day you're running into people who are going in and out of the hospital for it.
Right. So you took it literally. Go instead where there is no path.
Nice.
And leave a trail.
Nice.
So this recording is part of your trail.
Thanks.
in my opinion, that you're leaving this goodness behind. It will help other people. But what else moving forward in your life? Where else do you want to blaze a path and leave a trail? What else do you want to do that you haven't done yet, that you want to blaze a path? Or is there something that you've already done, but you want to do again, or you keep doing?
Yeah, that's cool that you asked that, because I'm at that path in my life where I'm trying to figure that out. And I think all this experience has encouraged me to do that. This is my 37th year in public education in the state of Georgia. And,
wow.
and I'm, trying to figure out if, when that chapter needs to close and something new needs to happen. So that saying is a big part of my world. Once I found it, I realized where's this thing been all my life? Because that's something that I've always tried to do, is figure out how to not have barriers stop me from being able to accomplish whatever it is I'm trying to. And I try to encourage others to do the same. And it's like, then suddenly I ran into this big barrier that's like, well, we'll see what happens. And came out on the other side. So it's like I'm trying to figure out, there's got to be another thing. That's, whatever that other thing is, I'm still trying to figure out, I guess is my answer.
Okay. Well, that's great. But, maybe you wouldn't have even gotten to this point if you hadn't climbed that mountain that you climbed, it's just part of your journey and part of your story.
Thanks.
There's a quote that I love by Barbara Neely, who wrote the Blanche White series of books. It's a little long, but I'm going to read it to you. If we're lucky, we grow into ourselves. We become more nuanced, more able to see the shades of gray, the thing beneath the thing, and we have less room for self-defeat, less patience for the useless and unnecessary. So we begin unloading our bags of woe bit by bit. It's as if the unconscious mind knows that the clock is ticking and we don't have a moment to waste on being anyone other than the person we genuinely are. And I feel like the first time I met you, you're a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. And we only know each other through this venue.
Right.
But you are who you genuinely are, and you've already brought such joy and light to the world. And I can only think that as you continue to unload your bags of woe bit by bit, you're going to walk forward into whatever your path is leading you. So thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to chat with you today on your program. It was really, really special for me.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. I greatly appreciate it. And this has been great. Thank you so much for spending time to talk to me about this.
My pleasure.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.